Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome again to class. We are happy for us to resume. I see the chats are buzzing with hellos. Nice to be back. Excited to continue. And we are as well very excited to continue with you. Today, I was going to say this week, but today it's a half week for us. So today we're going to be diving into the material. You may have had a chance to look at the training site, and it's an exciting one. It's on safety. Please make welcome our co-lead instructor, Tosin Ojekale, to take us through the world of safety in data centers. Welcome, Tosin.
Hello, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everyone. Good to be back here again. I hope you had a very interesting week already. And I hope you relaxed enough for today's class because we are going to be talking about something very, very important in the workspace. Just a quick sound check if you can hear me loud and clear enough, just to give a thumbs up in the live chat. Great, that's amazing. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right. While we are doing that, let me also share my screen so we can get all of the checks in at the same time. So just give me another thumbs up once you are able to see my screen. Okay, great. So that means we are good to go. All right. So like the topic was introduced to us, so today we'll be talking about fire safety. But before we go into today's topic, I'll just try and do a quick recap of what we've learned so far, so we know where we are coming from, where we are, and then where we are going to. It's really going to be an exciting period all through the period. So, but it's very important that we don't lose track of every of the topics. So we need to keep building on the past topic. So it's the same thing for experience. So you need to keep building on the previous exposure, experience, whatever you come across. That way, it's going to accumulate at some point, okay? Mary says, video camera has issues, can't see me. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to see you or if you're supposed to see me or what you meant by that. But if you can see me, it's fine enough, okay? All right, so while you're trying to fix your video camera, okay? So, yeah, so in the last couple of topics, so we talked about introduction to computer, right? Information technology. We talked about different aspects of information technology. We looked at a brief history of, we looked at brief history of computer. We looked at what information technology is about. We looked at different types of data center. We looked at on-premise data center. We looked at cloud data center. We also talked about hybrid data center. We talked about what makes up a data center, and we look at some of the components of data center in a very brief way. And we said most of the components we talked about, we are still going to talk about them as a full topic on their own. So that was the first thing. Then later we also had online view of what a data center looks like. That was the last class we had. So we did look at a 3D view of a data center. Femi walked us through a virtual data center, what a data center looks like, the components of a data center, the different aspects of a data center, what are some of the things that happen within a data center, some of the rooms that you will come across in a data center, what the monitoring room looks like, and all of those. So that view is something that you need to keep in your mind all through the class, because most of the topics we are going to be discussing will be based on some of those views that we've seen in terms of what data center looks like. Ahmed also shared with us some of the hardware components. We also looked at a 3D view of some of the hardware components that you find in a data center. Their parts, their components, how to detach them, how to couple them, how to couple a whole system. So what a switch looks like, entry-level switch, core switches, router, and other core network components. So I still remember all of those vividly as well. So I hope you also still remember every of those, because those are some of the things you get to see on a daily basis while working in a data center. So these are the things you get to monitor, their uptime. You need to understand their workings, challenges, issues, problem, reporting, management, and all of those. So those are the things we have learned so far. Okay, so great. So today we are going into another topic entirely. Today's topic is not really going to be something that you will get to deal with on a daily basis, but it's important that you also understand how this works in a data center environment. Apparently, you need to know about this. In most enterprise organizations, this is a very huge topic. So whether you are working as a consultant, as a technician, or as a visiting specialist, it's a topic that every data center holds very dear to their heart. It's very important that you go through initial training on fire safety generally, not just fire safety, even though our topic today is going to be more around fire safety. But most data center will do a kind of onboarding session for you, whether you're working there as a full-time staff or you are just visiting as a partner or as a consultant. So the first thing they will make sure that you go through is safety onboarding training. Now, safety, it's a general topic, but we are going to be talking about the fire safety, under safety today. So that's what we'll deal with in my own experience. I've worked both as a data center technician. I have worked as consultants. I've worked at various stages of data center as well. So one of the key things that you must get onboarded on when you move into a data center, especially if you are going to be working there maybe for a few days, for a few weeks, or you are going to be there permanently. So one of the first things that you get onboarded on is safety, because they want to make sure that as part of regulations, every personnel that works within a data center must be certified in basic safety knowledge. Okay, so you don't have to be safety experts, but at least you must understand a few things that you need to do when you have safety issues, especially fire issues within a data center environment. What are the basic things that you're expected to do? So those are the things that we'll be looking at today. So today's topic will be focusing on fire safety. Okay, all right, so let's dig into fire safety. I need help. All right, Emias, I think you should take that up with one of the TAs. They will assist you on how to schedule a meeting with a career success coach. Okay, so you can take it up with any of the TAs. They will assist you with that. All right, so what are the key goals for today? We have 3 key goals that we need to achieve today. The first one is systems. That's on the topic of fire safety. So the first one, we're going to talk about fire safety detections and preventions. Fire safety detections and prevention. That's our first goal for today. We need to understand that. Secondly, we'll be talking about infrastructure, fire safety as regards infrastructure and hardware. So that's going to be our second goal for today. And then our last goal for today is going to be on code and compliance. So what are the best standards? What are the practices for fire safety in a data center? This aspect of our lesson today is actually a specialty for a lot of people. This is something that a lot of people do for a living. They are just regulatory officers or compliance officers when it comes to safety, general safety. This is what they do. They understand a lot of regulatory framework, how it works, and they help a lot of organizations to set up safety standard within their own organization. So some of you might decide it's a way to go. So like we said at the beginning of this course, data center technician is just going to introduce you to a lot of aspects workings of data center. So you might at some point decide, okay, I'll prefer other aspect of data center than the technician. Okay, so this is one area too that a lot of people get comfortable with. So you can decide to become a regulator in standards and compliance for safety, especially relating to data center. Okay, all right. So let's start with the course properly for today. So fire detection and prevention. Fire detection and prevention. So that's what we are going to start with. Today, we are going to have brief definition of fire escalation, how to detect fire, and how to prevent fire. I love the aspect of prevention because, you know, they're like, people would say prevention is better than cure, especially when it comes to fire. I can say categorically that it's better to be on the safety side. You don't want to be on the errand side where you are trying to extinguish a fire or you have fire outbreak within the environment. It's not something that you really want to experience. Maybe few of us will get to experience it in our career lifespan. Not everybody will get to experience a fire outbreak, but it's very, very important that we understand what we need to do even when there is a fire outbreak, what is expected of us and how to go about them, okay? So the first thing we'll be looking at under fire safety is the fire triangle. And I'm going to explain why this is very, very important, especially for anyone that is going to take a fire safety course. Now, generally, when you talk about fire generally, so now there are three major elements or components that are required for fire outbreak or fire hazard to happen in any environment. The absence of any of these will make it almost impossible for you to have a fire outbreak. So for every fire outbreak, you are expected to it is expected that these three components will be available, okay? Now, the first one, in no particular order, there must be oxygen. That's one. There must be heat, and there must be fuel, okay? These three components are the elements that must be available for you to have a fire hazard. Now, remember that fire hazard is, when we talk about fire hazard, it doesn't have to be within a data center alone. It can be inside of a data center, it can be in a home, it can be in a workplace, it can be in a field, it can be anywhere, okay? So, but irrespective of the location, these three elements must always be present at any point in time for fire hazard to happen, okay? Just a minute. All right. So, like the definition we have here in the slide says, well, the fire triangle is a simple model for understanding the necessary ingredients required to ignite a fire. Okay, when heat, oxygen, and a fuel source are in the same location, a fire is possible. Now, let's look at these three components. How do they combine together to cause fire hazard? Okay, the first one is, let's look at oxygen. Now, for combustion to happen in any environment, you need a minimum of at least about 16% of oxygen. Okay, you need what? A minimum of about 16% oxygen within that environment. So which means it can be higher than that, but at least you need minimum of 16% of oxygen for combustion to happen. Now, if you look at the way we live in and our environment, even the air that we breathe in, we usually would contain around 21% of oxygen at the very minimum, the range between 21 and 24% of oxygen. So which means most time, within the environment we find ourselves, which means that element is always present, right? So that oxygen is almost always present in every environment that we find ourselves. So that component, which means everywhere you find yourself, there's a possibility of fire hazard, because one of the components is always available everywhere you are, except you find yourself in a lock-up environment where there's no ventilation. Even though there's no ventilation, you are still likely to have at least some level of oxygen within that space, but it might not be enough to cause fire accident, because your fire accident would require a minimum of 16%. Okay, so that's for oxygen. So the second one here is heat. All right, so now we would have heat. Most time is usually the initial ignition source. Okay, because most time when you have fire hazard, there definitely has to be element of heat happening somewhere. So, and most time heat is usually what the initial ignition source. Okay, so for a fire hazard to happen, heat must be present. Okay, and that heat must continue to be present for the fire hazard to continue to happen. Now, for heat itself, you can find it from different sources. Okay, so heat comes from various sources. It can be from lightning. It can be from things like even cigarettes. And that's why most data centers will tell you that they are non-smoking environments, okay, because of the dangers that they can bring to your environment. So lightning, cigarettes, campfire, even matches, electrical ignition or electrical spark are some of the sources of heat within an environment. So just to let you know. So we've looked at two things, and from what we've talked about so far, you see that some of these elements are almost always present everywhere you find yourself. So we've talked about oxygen, which you cannot live without. So everywhere you go, oxygen is present. When we talk about heat, you find out that one of these sources that we've mentioned is also likely to be present as well, especially because the data center would always have a cable that is running, either a network cable, power cable, generator cable, all sort of cables. So with the presence of all of these different types of cables, it means there's tendency for you to have a spark, okay? So that's another component that must always be present for fire hazard to happen. Then the last one, which is the third one, sorry, my hand is moving faster than my mouth. All right, so the third element here is the fuel, okay? So when we talk about the fuel, so it's also it's one of the materials that causes fire hazard as well. Okay, it's usually the material that is actually burning. Okay, so when you talk about fuel, it's the source of the fire itself. The source of the fire can be anything. It can be when we talk about fuel, it can be from a spark, electric spark. It can be from a shock, electric shock. It can be from gas. It can be from ethanol. It can be from even diesel, right? So those are the different sources of fuel. So, and it must be present as well for fire hazard to occur. So we've talked about these three elements and given different examples of all of this. And why are these examples very, very important? Now, because as static is also possible, but most time static shock to that's electrostatic discharge, that might not in most cases cause fire hazard, but also it's part of the things that you need to look out for as your own personal safety, because it can cause you some electrostatic reaction for the body as well. So that's most likely for personal injury, might not necessarily be for fire hazard in itself. Okay, so electric shock, spark, those are more likely to cause fire hazard. Okay, I hope that is well answered. All right, so now as a data center technician, you are likely to find yourself working in an environment that has all these three elements. Now, the presence of these three elements at the same time does not automatically mean there will always be fire hazard, but their presence only means that there's a chance that it could ignite fire. Okay, so that's the possibility is there. It doesn't mean it will happen. And like I said, some of us might not even get to experience a fire hazard within a workspace environment. I've been in environments where where we've had various fire alarm, but I think I've only experienced one real fire. Others have either been a drill or just something, maybe a smoke that causes fire alarm. Okay, so it's not something that happens often, but some of us might get to experience it. Okay, someone says on rare occasions, the static electricity spark can ignite the gasoline vapor, causing fire. Yes, it can. Like I said, it's very rare, very unlikely, but there's the possibility as well. We've seen a lot of those that happening, especially when you even have some other elements close to you, especially when you have a vibration close to you, and there's a static discharge that can happen as well. So, Benik, what you said is correct, but they are very rare. They are not things that do happen. It depends on the type of environment that you find yourself, but in most cases, that's why it's usually advisable, especially if you find yourself in the power generation environment, that you should not have any device that can cause vibration as well. So when you will need additional other elements together for that to spark or to ignite fire. So the possibility is actually there. So I do agree with you on the rare occasions that it can happen on rare occasions. Okay. All right. So let's move forward. So I hope this is very clear to us in terms of the components or elements that needs to be available or that needs to be present before fire hazard can happen. Okay. So we'll still look deep into each one of them and how to prevent. Remember that we are looking at prevention as well. So we'll look at how to prevent all of this. If you find yourself in a fire hazard situation, how do you take out some of these elements? Now, just to add to this, the easiest way to also to extinguish a fire hazard is to take away one of these elements. Okay, so let's make an assumption that there's a small fire outbreak, because I don't want to have a huge fire outbreak now. So let's just make an assumption of a small fire outbreak. Now, the easiest way to extinguish that fire is what? To take out one of these three elements. Now, depending on the type of fire that you are trying to extinguish, will determine which of these elements will be easiest for you to take out to extinguish the fire. So you might have so let's look at, since we have a lot of people here, I'm sure at least a good percentage of us have been in the kitchen or have used a gas cooker before. So let me ask a question. So if you have a fire outbreak in the kitchen, maybe from a gas cooker, so which of these three elements do you think would be the easiest for you to take away to extinguish the fire? It's just a small fire outbreak, not a big one. So don't tell me that you will run away. Yeah, absolutely. Definitely, Zachary, I agree. Definitely not water. The water is not even among the water is not part of the three elements that we're talking about here. So I'm not, so now let me take the question again. I'm not asking for what you can use. So you can use anything. So most of the answers you put here in terms of what you can use are correct. But I'm just trying to say, based on the elements that we've discussed here now, which one of them do you think will be the easiest to take away, at least to prevent or to extinguish a small fire outbreak? Yeah, Derek. I thought oxygen first and overthought. You don't have to overthink. Don't worry, it's just a small fire incident here. So oxygen, absolutely. I agree. So you guys have done amazingly well. I'm sure some of you have probably attended some fire safety training before now. I'm sure the easiest of them will be the oxygen. Okay, so that's why you see most time where you have people with a blanket always present in the kitchen environment, just for you to put it over the fire. Now, when you put a blanket over the fire, so what are you taking away? Yeah, she said, for example, when smoke detectors ring, we open windows rings. Yeah, so that's a reaction. So, but in that case, except you are trying to escape via the window, I'm not sure what you are trying to do, because you are actually bringing in more oxygen into the environment. So it's better to take away to deny that environment oxygen immediately. So that's why you find out that in a lot of workplaces that are fire compliant, what they do is that most of the doors and most of the equipment that they use in building most of this environment are fire resistant equipment, to be able to just because they don't want the fire to escalate. So they want to limit the environment of the fire. So they deny it oxygen. So oxygen, it doesn't mean that you can't take away any of these other elements, but it's just the one that is easier within the scenario that we've talked about here. So you can have other scenarios where you have something bigger, and oxygen might not be the easier one to take out here. So you might want to look for other means. Maybe you want to take care of the fuel using other firefighting equipment as well. Adrian. All right, so let's move ahead. So I hope this 3 elements and the examples we've given makes a lot of sense to you. All right, so we've talked about all the different examples of where you can have different sources of fire from the different elements that we've spoken about earlier on. So we have other fire risk that we need to identify here. All right. Ash says, can we just ask the fire to go away? I wish to. That would have been the easiest, right? I wish it's that simple. Okay, so let's look at some of these. Some of these fire risk sources that has been identified here under 4 different categories. We have power loads. So under power loads, we have generators and electronics equipment. Generators and electronic equipment can malfunction and cause electrical surge, arc flashes. How many of us have seen arc flashes or have experienced arc flashes before? How many? "17 plugs into one outlet." Michael, I'm not sure what you mean, but if your outlet has enough extensions and they are properly protected, please go ahead. But apart from that, just make sure that the loads can be taken care of by your outlet. All right, looks like not too many people have experienced arc flash before. Let me just give me a minute. Let me see if I can pull up something on arc flash. It's a very common electrical spark in enterprise environment. Not like it happens too often, but it's something that you just see, like a fire spark that comes out and then goes in. Depending on what triggers it, it can then continue to ignite the fire, or it might just be a one-off ignition. Let me see. Okay. Okay, I've seen something that might look. Let me just bring it to my screen here. I'm sure you guys can you see the arc flash image on the screen? Ryan says, I've seen power flashing from storms. Yeah, something like that, but here for electricals. So this is, yeah, now you see, guys, a lot of people have seen it before. So this is what arc flash looks like. So we are going to talk about how to prevent yourself in this situation. You might not likely experience something like this because the nature of your job does not require you to work on electrical power stations like this. So, but just in case you find yourself in this environment, what are the things you need to know and you need to do? So that's why we are talking about this, okay? Alison says Control or Delete. That means that man's eyebrow. But it looks like the man is wearing a fire safety cap. So that might have done Control Z for him. All right, so let me move this away and let's continue. All right, so that's what arc flash looks like. So those are some of the things that power loads can also, you can get from power load, okay? And that on its own can also result into fire hazard. So imagine other elements present while that arc flash happens, okay? So imagine that you have the other two elements that are required. So you have fuel and you have oxygen present in that same environment. That could lead to a bigger fire hazard, okay? So that's why we said, so you see that in most arc flashes, it will happen, boom, one off like that, and then it will recede immediately. Then depending if other elements are available, the fire can then start small again and then grow bigger, okay? So that's why you must always make sure that as much as possible, you've put in a lot of things in place to forestall that from happening. So that's under power loads. So let's look at other ones. It is that occur in kitchen? Okay, it's a very good question. She's asking if this can occur in the kitchen when frying a fish. Well, you tell me, I don't know. I'm not sure if that would be referred to as arc flash, but it's some form of maybe fish flash or oil flash. You can also have some of those as well. But yeah, I don't know. You can tell me. All right, so other sources, you have fuel sources. Fuel sources in generators and storage are combustible and must be handled with care, okay? So that's why a lot of time in this data center or enterprise environment, most diesel storage tank are either underground or they are placed high somewhere that there can be accidental discharge. Okay, so they are usually positioned with safety in mind, okay, because they contain combustible elements, okay, and that can result into fire. Okay, so that's another source of fire risk. Okay, we've talked about generator and electrical substances. Moses, I love that clip that you just shared. What's that guy thinking? What's in his mind? All right, so the next one here talks about ventilation, okay? Closed spaces like ventilation ducts and spaces under raised floors with moving air can cause fire to spread quickly. How many of us have seen ventilation ducts? I'm sure at least one of the 3D display Femi showed, was it last week, actually has the ventilation duct. So you see all those big pipes that are usually tagged to the ceiling. Not all of them, they have different purposes, but some of them are ventilation ducts. So either to bring in air into the, depending on the type of cooling system that is being used in the data center. So some of them might actually be bringing in air into the data center, while some of them will be taking out heat from the data center out and then gets converted into water and then to other things outside, okay? So ventilation too can be a source of ventilation ducts and under spaces under raised floor. I showed you what a raised floor looks like in one of the classes we did earlier on, where I said that it can also be referred to as a risk floor as well. So we talked about that. So underneath that as well, you have some moving air as well that can also, on their own, they won't cause fire, but they can help fire to ignite quickly and spread faster. So that's what they do. Mostly that's what oxygen is meant for. It's meant to help to expand the scope of the fire. Then the last one here talks about cabling. So for cabling, cabling and other equipment should be fire resistant rated to prevent ignition and spread of fire. So most data center cables are fire resistant, okay? Not just most of the equipment, like I mentioned, are usually fire resistant. Fire is a major factor of a major determinant when they are sourcing for equipment in the data center, from the door to the rack, to the servers, to the cables, to the network devices, to the paint. So you'll be amazed that even paints, we have fire resistant paints as well. So those are some of most data center would factor that into everything they are building, every object that they bring into the data center. Fire is one of the major considerations that they would have to think of when buying or sourcing for those equipment. So most time they would go for fire resistant equipment, okay? So these are what fire risk sources. All right, let's move ahead. Now we've talked about the elements that needs to be present for fire to happen. We've talked about some of the sources of fire within the data center environment. Now, because we know that it is almost impossible for you to say you are 100% fireproof, the only thing you can always do is to make sure that you are very proactive in terms of your monitoring and reporting. That's the only way to go about fire. So you can't say, oh, every of our equipment is fire resistant, and because of that, we are not expecting a fire outbreak. No, that's not going to happen. You can only reduce the risk of fire outbreak. You cannot completely eliminate fire outbreak, okay? The slightest of mistake can result into fire outbreak. Okay, now to put in place proper monitoring detection system, so for you to do proper monitoring of your environment and to make sure that there is early detection of likely fire outbreak. So we are going to be discussing some of the systems that detection systems that you can have within a data center that you should be aware of, so that when you see them, you are not like completely clueless and say, why do we have this? Why did we have this there? But it says, which part of the data center has the highest risk of fire? That's a very good question, actually. Okay, so when you talk about the aspect or the area of data center that has the highest risk, so the question I'm going to pose back to you is, which one of them do you think should be? Now, you know, remember, even though we did not discuss in detail, we said there are two major areas within a data center. We have the gray space area, and then we have the white space area. So we said the gray space area, we'll still talk about it in one of the classes when we are talking about the physical space, but just to remind us of the brief that I did mention. So we have the gray space, we have the white space. The gray space usually contains these supporting components for your data center. Okay, the supporting component of your data center, and that's talking about the generating set, the different power generation sources, your electrical appliances, your diesel, your generator, all of the power sources are in the gray spaces. Then in the white spaces, you have your core data center equipment, which is more of the racks, the servers, the network component, the cables, and all of those. So now between those two that I've mentioned, now I'm going to ask the question back. Which of these two areas do you think poses more risk of fire? Yeah, so that's it. So the gray area. Now that doesn't mean that even though it poses higher risk, that doesn't mean that fire would most likely start from there, okay? This is just a conversation that we are having. Okay, so if you are very careful enough within your gray space and you are less careful within your white space, then fire might get, the chance of fire starting from your white space might actually be higher, okay? So don't take my word for it that your fire is likely to happen from your gray space. So we are just having a conversation in terms of the type of components that you find in each of those areas, okay? So that questions, I didn't give you any complete answer. So we all give answers back based on the elements that are like the elements and the sources of fire that we have in each of those areas, okay? Now, we've talked about a lot about fire. So let's talk about how do we detect fire? Now, you can put in detection systems in place to either detect early or to detect late, depending on the area. You can have some areas where the equipment you have there are not so, everything is important, but when it comes to risk, so every organization would always have what is called risk appetite, right? Risk appetite. The risk appetite is usually about the amount of risk that the company is willing to take per time that is not going to affect the overall operation of an organization. Okay, so the risk appetite usually would differ from organization to organization. So it depends on different areas of the environment, depends on different types of equipment that they have there, and it depends on how much of effect that any of those equipment can have on their overall operations. Okay. Now, remember during the 3D view that we were shown last week, we talked about different spaces within the data center, right? So we talked about the entrances, the office space, the core data center. Femi took us through the monitoring room and a lot of those things, right? Now, you'll find out that in each of those spaces, you would have, they have different, their importance level will differ, right? And the type of things you have in all of those spaces would also differ. Yeah, Derek, that very correct. So the innovation center as well. So yeah, I remember that we have the innovation center where we have a lot of innovation projects going on. So now, depending on that, you need to put in place, we've talked about the importance of the different spaces in a data center. And because of that, and because they have different risk elements, and the company has its own risk appetite. So you need to find a way to make sure that, and mostly for data centers, they are highly rated, because you don't want, especially if you are a service provider, if your data center is not an on-prem data center that is meant for your own businesses alone. So if you are a service provider like Amazon, AWS, Microsoft, Google, Facebook, or all of those, and you are providing data center services to other customers there, it means you don't want to have fire outbreak issue in your environment, because it's going to affect your revenue. It is going to affect your image as an organization. It is going to affect your rating as well. Okay, because for every data center site that you will have different ratings. So you can be rated as level 1, you can be rated level 2, level 3, or level 4 data center. All of these ratings are based on your availability, resilience, capacity, and all of those things. So those are things that are used to rate you. So you don't want a situation where your rating will go down. And your rating is part of what you use for your cost as well, because you are highly rated. So, and it means that you can provide what? You can provide services that are expensive than other organizations that are low, that have lower ratings. So that's why a lot of these things are important to data center services. So they need to find a way to make sure that anything that can cause disruption to their services are detected early. And one of those things is fire. So that's why you need to put in place a fire detection system in your data center to make sure that you detect, even smoke needs to be detected. And those are the things that you need to detect early before they move from smoke to fire, okay? So we'll look at the various spaces within your data center and the different types of detection system that you need to put in place. So the three spaces that we'll be looking at is, we'll look at the overall building, we'll look at the room, which is more of the white spaces, and then we'll look at the racks as well. Now, this doesn't mean that your gray spaces doesn't have detection system. They do have as well, but for the sake of this class, we'll focus more on this. So we'll talk about the building. So for the building, you have building level detection that covers the entire data area, okay? So that's physical building. So you have detections that cover the entire building area. So if any part of the building is about to ignite fire, you need a detection system in place to make sure that it can be reported early enough. For the room, or for rooms, you need what detection within each room and within plenums, that's confined areas of airflows. Then for racks, you need detection on the equipment itself, including manual inspection with scanners. So we'll look at some of this manual inspection equipment that you can have, heat scanners, smoke detectors, where to use them and how to use them and their purposes, okay? All right, let's move ahead. All right, so we have types of detectors. So these are the different types of detectors that you can have within a data center environment, not just data center, office space, home environment, anywhere that you are trying to detect fire, so you can install this there, okay? So you have from the y-axis to the x-axis. So you have from the bottom to the left, then to the right. So there are two things. If you look at this graph here, it's showing us two things. We have the fire level and we have the smoke level. Okay, we have what? We have two major components that we are detecting here, or that any of these equipment here or gadget here can detect. It's either fire or smoke. So they are able to detect both, but they are sensitive. How sensitive they are depends on which of them or which one of them. Okay. Now, two things you need to be able to consider is, one, how early that any of this equipment can detect, and two, what is their scope of detection, the area that it can cover. Okay. Now let's look, for example, there are times within your rack centers, or you are within a rack space room, and you just feel like something you can perceive electrical smoke, right? Sometimes we are just like, I feel like there's a smoke or something, right? It's not that pronounced or loud, but you can smell it from afar. It looks like there's a spark or something somewhere, right? Those type of smoke cannot be detected by a sprinkler bulb, the one you have at the top. Let me use my annotation spotlight. So if you have this sprinkler bulb here, this sprinkler bulb cannot detect that type of smoke. So if you look at this graph here, you see the type of smoke that this sprinkler bulb is likely to detect. It's that it's quite very high, right? So it's quite high. That means you are expected to use this where you have higher fire range and higher smoke. So which means when fire outbreak is really high and smoke is really high, you need a sprinkler bulb. Then when you have something a little lower than the height of the sprinkler bulb, something at this level, what you need is what? Heat detector. Then when you come down more, when the fire is not so much and the smoke is not too much, then you need a conventional smoke detector. And then if you come lower again, you need what? Analog smoke detector. And then when you come down to the very least, you are going to need air sampling equipment. Now, this is the one I was going to talk about when I said sometimes when you just move around and you can perceive something like electric smell, when you can't really see where it is coming from. In such scenario, you are going to need this air sampling equipment or aspirator. Okay, so which means you are going to unhold it. It has a sensor that comes with it. So what you do is you can go around, manually move closer to anywhere you think the smell is coming from any of the rack. You go around, you put the detector inside of the rack, around the rack manually like that. So it will try to see the strength of the smoke, to know where that smoke is coming from. So that's what this air sampling is going to do. So the more you move around, the stronger the smoke is detecting, so it will beep and show you where the smoke is likely coming from. So that's what you do with this first one here. For the second one, it is just a detector, which is the one that a lot of us probably have seen in homes, hotels, and in a lot of locations. So this one will also detect if the smoke or fire is a little higher than what you would need manual equipment for. In most cases, when it gets to this level, you probably would see the smoke. The smoke is mostly obvious. So like someone mentioned from the one from oil fire or frying fish. So from the frying fish, you are like the analog smoke detector is likely to detect that, okay, at that stage, we should. I actually had one experience in one of the hotels I went, right? So I came back from work and I was so tired and I just needed to warm my food and just eat. So I went into the kitchen and then I put the food on the fire. And then I just said, let me have just 2 minutes rest in the sitting room. And the next minute, I just hear the alarm sound. And the noise was what woke me up. I'm like, what happened? I ran back to the kitchen and then I realized that the food was already getting smoky. Okay, so in most scenario like that, this analog smoke detector will detect them. Now, why they are analog in most cases is because you need manual intervention to activate them and to deactivate them. It doesn't mean that they need to be somebody needs to go there when there's an alarm before they will ring. No, they work fine. Once you activate them and there's smoke to a certain level, the alarm rings immediately. And then you will need somebody to manually go there to deactivate it. That's it about manual smoke detector. So you need to manually activate it and then manually deactivate it as well. Then, depending on the level, so if we move from this analog detector level to something in like the middle, so this is what you would have in conventional smoke detector. Now, the analog one is mostly common in homes, maybe smaller offices and things like that. But this third one here is very common in data center, offices, enterprise organization, industries, and things like that. So you are likely to see this one more even in a data center, right? This conventional smoke detector, because it's able to detect smoke at this level and fire at this level. Now, all of this that we've talked, even up to this heat detector, they are just to detect. They would not do anything more than just raising awareness, okay? The heat detector is controlling the temperature of required only, and smoke detector controls smoke. If there is smoke or high temperature, the fire alarm spike will sound. Yeah, absolutely. That's just what they do. So it's just, they literally, what they do is just, they have sensors in them. So we'll still look at the inside of some of this equipment. You will see the components of some of them as well, so that will make more sense. But basically, that's their job. It's just when there's smoke, they can detect smoke. For the heat detector, so it is basically what? Checking the temperature of the room. So if the temperature is going beyond a certain level, then it's going to, there's going to be an alarm as well. So that's what the heat detector is meant for. The heat detector is to detect it. It's not for for smoke, it's for heat. Okay. Then we have the last one at the top here, sprinkler bulb. Okay, so the sprinkler bulb is used mostly in conjunction with heat detector and conventional smoke detector. So you need to pair it with any of those ones. So the whole idea is when there is a fire of this magnitude at this level, it means it's something that can cause disaster. So it means disaster is in view. So in this case, this is more of not just a detector equipment, but something to fight the fire. So it's like a firefighting equipment up here. So usually it has some kind of either oxygen or liquid connected to it. Okay, so once any of these raises an alarm and the fire range is at this level, this will it's going to ignite, and then you have liquid or gas substance coming out of this to try to fight the fire. Okay, so that's the job of the sprinkler bulb. So it's a firefighting equipment. Okay, all right, these are the different types of fire detecting equipment that you are most likely to come across in a data center environment, and you should understand their purposes at this point. Okay, are we good? Any question? Anyone with any of this detector at home? Do any of you have any of this detector at home? Never can say. Anyone with a fire detector or heat detector at home? Or have you seen this air sampling equipment before? Yeah, you see, some people said yes. And I know some people live perpetually in maybe in the hotel or something. Some people just want to have good. Yeah, great. So Amanda, I've seen the air sampling equipment before. Great. So you guys have seen some of these before. Great. Ronit says she has conventional detector at home. Great. Just says, to be fair, I have it, but I might need to replace the batteries. Yeah, so that means you've been dealing with some noise in your beepings in your environment for some time, and you've just been living with that. So you need to take care of the battery, let the detector do its job. So without the battery, if it's dead, then it's not useful. Okay. Someone says, in data center room and data center area must have analog smoke detector and sprinkler. Well, in most cases, what you would have is combinations, okay? So like I mentioned earlier, I said it depends on the space that you are installing any of these. Some space will require you to have just heat detector and sprinkler bulb. Some spaces will just require, like maybe the office spaces where people are sitting. You are likely to have just conventional smoke detector and maybe sprinkler bulb in most of those cases. So it depends on the environment. Most time you will have combination of the two. But what I've seen in most gray areas, what you will just have is every other thing apart from the sprinkler bulb, because of the other elements that are available or that you can find there. So you might not want to use sprinkler bulb. So that in those cases, what you will see, firefighting hose and other equipment, extinguishers and things around those gray areas, okay? Because in most cases, they are usually open areas, so you might not find a lot of these detectors there. So what you would see, we'll still talk about some of them, so let me not preempt, so we'll get to see some of them. Marco says, if that tragic level where the sprinkler turned on, is the servers and equipment turned off? Marco, that's actually a very good question and something to actually talk about, okay? Now, remember we said something earlier on, maybe. So when it comes to here, actually, if you look at the under the rack, it says the detection on the equipment itself, including manual inspection of scanners. Now, because of the nature of racks and servers, a sprinkler might not be the best thing to fight them. Okay, except it all depends on the type of fire anyway. But in most cases, they have other ways. So maybe some other type of firefighting equipment that they use, usually connected to the rack. Maybe something gaseous or even powder in nature. A lot of the ones I've seen are chemicals with like powder in nature. Now, the reason is that remember that after the fire, you are still going to count your losses and you want to salvage as much as possible, right? So you don't want to use any form of liquid to fight fire inside of your rack spaces. Okay, so most likely they will need something maybe gaseous or something like powder, chemical powder in nature and things like that for rack environments. Okay, so it depends. There are different ways to fight fire within a data center, but most data centers will not use liquid to fight fire. That's for the rack spaces. All right, so let's move ahead. So we talked about the smoke detector. So this is one of the equipment that we looked at earlier on. So you see the inside of the equipment, you see some of the components that are inside it. You see a laser smoke detector detection chambers. Okay, these ones are the chambers. They are the ones that are used for the laser smoke. Then you have the outer part of it, which has pipe connections. That's where the air comes in from. So this is where the sensor comes in to see the level of smoke that is coming in. Says fancy. Yeah, maybe. Then inside of it, you have a panel, which has relays and digital outputs. So the relays are more of the electrical components inside of the detectors that are used to what? Those are some of the components that are used to either for the sensors or to trigger the alarm based on whatever amount of smoke that is coming in through these pipes and things like that, okay? And then you have the main board, which is what we've seen here. It's slant here. A lot of diodes, a lot of connectors and things connecting the different components, the chambers and the relays to the board. Then at the back of this relay panel, you have a fan here that is cooling the relay board and the board as well. Then outside here, you have the exhaust as well. So this is the internal of a detector, a smoke detector. So this is what the inside looks like. So highly sensitive detectors that uses lasers to detect invisible traces of smoke, okay? Like the one I showed you, what is it? Like this one at the bottom here for the air sampling equipment. So that's how the inside looks like. Okay, so let's look at another one. So this is another smoke detector, manual one. So you see this is heat detector. So used to detect an increase in ambient temperature in an area. Okay, so this is the inside of it, what it looks like. So you have the heat collector, you have the bimetal, you have the plastic guard, and you have the air vent. Okay, so these are the components of heat detector. Someone has here, it says, is the aspirator handheld or wall mounted? So if we go back to what we say the job of the aspirator is, so you are most likely to have it as an handheld device, okay? Because you are using it to actually look for invisible smoke. So if you station it or you mount it somewhere permanently, the equipment is as good as you. You don't know where the smoke is coming from. The equipment doesn't know where the equipment is coming from as well. So it's mostly handheld. You need to manually use it to trace the location of the smoke, okay? So that's the job. So it's usually handheld. All right, so I'm sure everybody here has seen this before, right? Everyone here must have seen this. I still use this recently when there was a fire alarm, when there was a fire outbreak where I stay. So basically what this does is for to trigger the alarm if you notice fire. Okay, so it's a fire alarm, usually strategically positioned in different area around the office, data center, workspace. So you definitely would find this in most areas within a data center, located in most walkways, entrances, and exit points. Okay, you would find this. So don't hesitate to use this if you notice smoke or fire outbreak. You might just be saving a life. Okay, so that's it's just to manually call people to the call points. Okay, so the moment there's an alarm, it means everybody needs to leave whatever they are doing and go to the call point. Okay, someone is asking, whether the fire alarm system will be monitored by the data center. Yes, absolutely. So what you have for most of this equipment, they also have a situation room, okay, where they monitor all of this. So fire is not something that you just wait. And that is why, apart from that, so there are two ways that you monitor fire alarm. So if it is a multi-floor environment, you would usually have people that are assigned and referred to as the fire marshals at every levels, okay? So you would definitely would have people called fire marshals. So those are the people that are well-trained and have been assigned to each floor to take care of emergency situations. So when there's fire alarm, they tell people where to go, what to use, what not to use, and what to do. So they guide people through the process, okay, or when there's a fire outbreak or there's an alarm in itself. Ah, okay, great. You saved life. Okay. All right, I've seen people. So in my space, when I actually triggered this, some people still did not wake up until the next morning when we told them there was a fire and there was an alarm, and the person was like, really, where? And I said, in the compound. He said they didn't hear anything. And I'm like, seriously? So that's that. But definitely it's something that needs to be very visible. It needs to be well sighted so that it must always be in a line of sight where people can easily have access to it and then trigger it, okay? All right, so that's for fire alarm. So like I was mentioning or answering the question, so either they are using the fire alarm, fire marshals, or the central monitoring points. So there's a situation room always for fire alarm. So they are also monitoring it. So most of these equipment, they have sensors installed on them, okay? Because sometimes when there's a fire, and it's a multi-level floor, it's difficult to know immediately where the fire starts from. So I've been in a building where for the first 10, 15 minutes, nobody was sure where the fire alarm was triggered from. So everybody was done. People didn't know whether to use the staircase or which staircase to use, or whether to come downstairs or to go to remain wherever they are. And that's why it's also very important that you have a situation room where this is being monitored. So most of these devices have sensors reporting. So when any of this gets triggered, they report on the screen, right? Just the same way you see the monitoring room that Femi showed us there. We have something similar to that for fire alarm as well. So where people are monitoring that on a daily basis to make sure that they know when something is about to go bad. So it's not just about being reactive. Fire is something that you need to be proactive about. So it's being monitored so that when it happens, they can also coordinate people effectively to tell them where to go, knowing fully well that the fire is at a particular floor, okay? Okay, so Marco is asking that at what level, if ever, that the choice to turn off the servers come to play, as weighing the cost of servers and data to the cost. So when there's fire, your thinking is not about whether to switch off a server or not at that point. We're talking about something disastrous, okay? When there's fire, it's an emergency situation. Usually you are advised to leave everything you are doing. You are not even advised to take your own personal PC. What you are supposed to leave the environment immediately. That's it, safety first. So that's why I said before you start to work in a data center, that's part of one of the onboarding training that you would have to go through. When there's fire, what should be your reaction? What should you do in such situations? They tell you not to panic. The first thing is to what? Look out for the exit point, move straight, use the staircase, don't use the elevator, move straight to the call point, don't look back, don't try to be a hero, just get out of the environment and move away as far as possible from the fire environment, okay? So if you try to be a hero, you can, someone can lose their life. The company will definitely replace the equipment, but they can't replace the life that get lost in the case of disaster. So, and that's why most data centers, so part of what we'll talk about is, I think I also explained it about disaster recovery, high availability, and things like that. So it's very unlikely that your primary site and your backup site will get, you have such situation in both environments at the same time, very unlikely, okay? So if your primary data center, if you're having a disaster there, definitely services will be filled over to your backup site, and operations will still continue while the company find a way to fix whatever issues that that might have arisen triggered the fire. So obviously there's going to be an audit at the end of it, or to know what happens, what led to it, what they could have done better next time, and all of those. So lessons will be learned. So don't try to be a hero. There's nothing in fire drill or whatever that talks about switching off fire servers. There's no part of fire safety that talks about switching off anything. The only thing they will tell you is about your safety and your safety alone. So that's it. So I said, so I guess no remote switch off. So basically, what exactly are you trying to switch off is the thing. So even if you switch off a server and it still gets burned by fire, you probably still won't recover anything anyway. So switching off a fire doesn't really help anything at that point. So the only thing you can do at that point is to make sure you have a disaster recovery site where you can fail over to. Okay. All right, so let's move ahead. Heat scanners, we'll talk about heat scanners. So heat scanners allows technician to get a visual of heat levels in an area. This prevents equipment failure and fire before they start. This is very, very important. That in most cases, these ones are not, so you can have the mobile one, but in most data center, they have it as a mounted equipment, okay? They have it as a mounted equipment that is that senses, that has sensors to scan the data center environment. Data centers generally have the temperature limits that they must operate in. Anything above that, servers will start to react negatively to the environment, okay? So a data center needs to be monitored to make sure that the temperature is kept to a certain degree always, okay? Because you are dealing with servers here and you want to make sure that they are always cool, okay? So we still have a class that is dedicated to cooling, power, and all of those things, and then we'll look at that more detailed. So this is one of the equipment that you can use within your environment. So I was planning for us to have a break on the dot, but I think I missed it. So we'll do it in the next 3 minutes. So let's just take one more. Yeah, so we've talked about alarm earlier on. So we have, these are other alarm signals, okay? So this usually have LED lights it's just an indicator for people to know, especially if it's a very big location. So when you trigger the alarm button, so you need something to signal the location of where the fire is likely happening. So these ones are installed in strategic locations so that when the alarm is triggered, this the bulb or the LED inside of these alarms here begins to indicate where the fire is happening, so everybody can, or at least most people can, take note and see where the fire is to avoid such area. So that's the purpose of this. So alarm receives a signal from the control room and alerts data center staff and the fire department to danger in the area. Okay, so that's the purpose of this one, is just to indicate the location and to get people, it's for awareness. Let me put it that way. It's mostly for awareness so that people can be aware that there's a fire outbreak. Then the next one is the fire control unit, okay? So for the fire control unit, these are all of the components that you would have within a fire control unit. So this is more like the switchboard area where you control all of your appliances, electrical appliances from. So here you have three key things. You have the periphery, you have the control unit itself, and you have the actions, okay? So under the periphery, you have the automatic fire detectors, you have the manual call point, you have the contacts. Contacts are usually for the fire alarm services, especially if you have contracts with some of them, even your insurance company and everybody that needs to be involved. Okay, so you usually would have the contacts here. So you need to, fire marshals need to call them. Okay, then you have the control unit where you have the fire detection control unit. So remember I said that you would always have a control unit where you have the detection control unit. So all of these periphery here, especially for the detectors here, there are sensors report to this fire detection unit. So once they report to this unit is what triggers the alarms here for actions. Okay, so you have the different alarms, you have the fire control, either the firefighter or other automatic fire control equipment, and then you have the fire brigade getting to actions. So first you have the periphery, which you use to detect fire. You have the control unit, which will send signal to every other unit for actions using the alarm and notifications. Okay, so let's take a 10 minutes break and then we'll come back to complete this. Great, thank you. All right, great. All right, so what did you guys do with your 10 minutes? Coffee, snacks, or you just took a walk? See several people type a pin. Okay, while at that, all right, so let's continue from where we stopped. So we're looking at fire detection. So we've completed that part of the detection. So we look at the various type of devices and equipment that can be used for fire detection. So for more on fire detection methods and a video showing fire detection system in the data center will be provided in the study guide for this lesson. Okay, all right, so let's move on. So next we'll be looking at fire infrastructure and hardware. Fire infrastructure and hardware. So that's the next topic we'll be looking at under fire safety. Okay, so let's go into that. So the first one we are going to look at is cable jackets. I know this is not something very popular or that a lot of us are probably aware of. Yes, maybe we've just seen cables, but we are not sure why those cables are the way they have, the color code, what they do, and all of those, okay? So remember we said something about most equipment in data center being fire resistant, okay? So we'll look at how they work and how you can use some of this, especially when it comes to cabling within a data center. Okay, so first we'll consider cable jackets. Cable jackets are rated based on their resistance to fire, okay? Higher rated cables are used in areas where fire is more likely to spread, okay? All right, so basically that's the essence of the cable jacket. There's nothing about the cable jacket. It's not a technology, it's not like something outside of the ordinary. So cable jacket is not, it has nothing to do with this building that you see here, but how it is used around this building that you see, okay? It's more of how it is used around this, not about this in itself, okay? So we have three types here that we're going to discuss. We have the CMP plenum, usually used where you have air ducts, where you have risers in wall and then in open area. So it can be used in any of these. Then you have CMR riser. So it can be used in risers, it can be used in wall, and it can be used in open area. Then you have CM, which is general. Okay, so this can be used in open area. Okay, so those are the three types of cable jackets that we have. So usually you see the deep blue one, you see the position. Usually it's used where space between the structural ceiling and the dropped ceiling here. So this is where it is mostly used. It doesn't mean that any of this would not work anywhere. It's just what the cable jacket is about is more of how resistant each one of them are to fire. Okay, so that's basically what they are about, but they do the same job in terms of when you are using them to carry data traffic. So, but in terms of fire resistance, their level of fire resistance differ, okay? Then you have the CMR, which can be used, mostly used in wall, and then in riser as well, they can be used, okay? So risers are a space such as shafts or ducts runs vertically through one or more floors in the building. Okay, so that's for CMR. And the last one, which is CM general, is used in open area. So all other area that is not plenum or riser and on the same floor. So that's where you see this light blue being used. Okay, so it's just about the quality of the cable jacket, cable cover. That's basically what the cable jacket is. So their quality differs in the sense of fire resistance, okay, how they resist fire. Okay, so that's what cable jacket is about. So the next thing we're going to talk about is fire suppression. Okay, I'm sure a lot of us we've seen this particular type of fire suppressor. It's very common in most areas that where they are fire compliant. Okay, so fire suppression methods in data centers seek to quickly contain fires while also keeping technicians and equipment safe, as well as minimizing environmental impacts. Dry pipe sprinkler systems, clean agent systems, and room sealing have a few of the methods employed to protect data center from fire. Okay, so these ones using this is most staffs would have basic understanding of how to use this. It's one of the easiest firefighting equipment to use. They come in different sizes, different range, and they also have different types of chemical inside of it, usually referred to as agents. So they have different types of chemical agents inside of them. Okay, so you need to decide what, you need to know which one is in use. So we'll still talk about that in a subsequent slide, because some of them also contain hazardous material. So you need to know, so usually like what you see a label here, the label will indicate the type of agent that is inside the suppression, okay? So if it's something that is environmental friendly or something that is hazardous, so that you know. So what it simply means is that if it is hazardous, when it's being used, you must cover your nose. Okay, it's not something that you should inhale. All right. So, but if it's something that is eco-friendly to be indicated, which means while it is in use, it doesn't cause any side effects. So let's talk about the goals of a fire suppression. So we have one, detection. Usually automatic fire suppression systems comes with their own detection system. So for most environments, data center, enterprise organization, so you have all of those automatic heat detector and smoke detectors already used or positioned in different locations, strategic locations like that. Now they are also connected to firefighting equipment or fire suppressions. Okay, so once those things, once the fire alarm is triggered, And depending on what triggered it and the level of heat that was detected or smoke or fire that was detected, it's likely to trigger a sprinkler or any of the fire suppressions systems that you have in place. Okay, so the moment it's activated, so a call to action, so you have either the sprinkler at work or you have the firefighters coming in to also help out as well. So the second one is for humans. Suppression agents such as halon could cause suffocation as it decreases the oxygen percentage in the room. Okay, so which means this type of suppression is used to what? To eliminate which of the elements that we three elements that we talked about earlier on. So which of the elements would this halon try to use to eliminate out of the three elements that must be present in fire for fire hazard to happen? I'm waiting for your responses. I see several people typing, but I didn't see any. Or am I? Let me see if I'm not. No wonder. So I'm not. There are responses, but then I couldn't see them, so I had to update. Get to that. Thanks, guys. Sorry, I've been missing all of you. I hope I have not missed your questions. Looks like I moved. So just a minute, I need to move to the end of the chat window so I can see the latest ones. All right, great. So thanks, guys. So it's actually used to fight the oxygen. So it's used to eliminate the oxygen level to below 16 so that the fire does not have that particular element to thrive any longer. Okay, so Anya is asking what's the question again. So I was talking about this second element here, this suppression agent, halon. Which of the elements, three elements that must be present for fire hazard to occur, which one of them is it trying to eliminate to fight the fire? So that's what this is about. So, and the responses are on spot, they are spot on. Oxygen. Yes, absolutely. All right, so the next one here is equipment. It should be safe to operate the equipment inside the data center. For example, water may damage electronics, so clean agents are used. Remember I said something about this when we were talking about when someone was asking whether we need to switch off the servers when there's a fire disaster and things like that. So if the fire is actually within the data center itself, where you have your servers and racks, so usually a clean agent is what is mostly used within the rack space, because you don't want to use water. So if you use water, there's a chance that you damage the server. So there's no point. So by the time the fire is extinguished, then you don't have any servers to recover from any longer. So usually in most rack space, you use clean agents as your suppression equipment, okay? Then last one, environment. So global warming potentials, GWP, and ozone depletion potentials. Those are two things that you need to, Justice says, never used water for electrical fire. Absolutely not. You might be triggering something else completely. So the GWP, which is global warming potential, and ODP, ozone depletion potential, must be looked at during the selection processes. So some of these suppression equipment are not environmental friendly, even though they might be very effective at fighting fire, but they might not be environmental friendly. So while selecting which suppression to use, you need to consider these two major factors. Okay. Bonnie says, is clean agent gas or liquid? Clean agent can be in either form. Okay, it can be gaseous, it can be liquid, but for your rack space, you would most likely use a gaseous a clean agent that is gas in nature.
All them cars going to the gas station.
Okay, so you don't want to use anything liquid in your rack environments because you just want to make sure that you can get your servers after the fire incident, okay? So most likely it's either gas, they are mostly gas or maybe powder in nature. Okay, so but what's even more important is that you must make sure that they are compliant with GWP and ODP. GWP is global warming potential, and ODP is ozone depletion potential. So make sure that whatever suppression that you select is compliant with both of these. Yeah, another very, Bodik, I don't know if are you trying to set up a fire fighting office? Says how to clean out the clean agent from the servers. I haven't even experienced one of those before, but definitely I know that firefighters definitely would have, or firefighting companies definitely have a way of cleaning up. So I saw something very that might be similar to that. So you remember I said I had a similar experience recently where we had to use the fire alarm, okay? So there was a car burning, okay? So we called the fire service. They came, they extinguished the fire, but the aftermath of the fire left a lot of debris and black or dark spots everywhere around where the fire was, and they needed to clean it. So they brought, after the fire extinguishing, they brought other set of equipment to clean up the place, and it took them quite a few hours. It was really a lot of work. Even me, I was wondering, why do you have to clean it? There's nothing there again, but they had to remove all of the spots and the dirt, dark spots on the floor. And they came with different types of equipment, very heavy equipment to flush, to wash, to clean. They use liquid, they use powder agent, they use all sort of different types of equipment to clean the place. So definitely I know those that are in that industry know how to do cleanup after such mess. So it's something that we, but as a data center technician, it's not within our scope to fight fire or to do cleanup after fighting the fire, okay? All right, so let's continue. Ash says, open up some windows. Remember, that's still oxygen. So if you are just having smoke, yes, maybe that would be fine. But the moment there's fire, opening window most time doesn't help. Okay. All right, so the next one here talks about dry pipe sprinkler system. I'm sure if you see a lot of data centers are actually using this open roof. They are now adopting this open roof system. So before, you know, you have everything covered up, but now if you walk into data center, you see all of these duct pipes and everything open roof. So nothing is hidden. You see everything the way they have. So the dry pipe sprinklers, usually what they contain, so they contain water. Okay, so those are the pipe that takes water to the sprinklers, so that when the fire alarm is activated, and then the sprinklers are set to fight the fire. So they need something. Something to supply. They need supplier for whatever suppression agent that they are using. So that's the purpose of this dry pipes sprinkler system. They are also connected to a source to get all of the required suppression agent, okay? So, but in this case, we have what? Dry pipe sprinklers only contain water when activated to suppress a fire. This prevents accidental leakage of water onto equipment during normal operation, okay? So that's the purpose of this pipe. It's just to supply. So that's the supply line for the sprinklers. Then water mist systems. So some water-based fire suppression uses highly concentrated water mist. Okay, this mist is highly effective at controlling fires and uses less water than normal sprinklers system. So this is, we are talking about recovery, right? After incident. So you want to make sure that as much as possible, you are able to recover as much as possible, if possible. Anyway, that's usually not the objective when there is fire. But because you are also planning ahead, right? So it's not something that is just happening in an ad hoc fashion. That's something that you didn't plan for. So it's something you've taken time to design and plan for. So recovery is also part of your fire disaster plan. How do we recover from a fire disaster? So the plan is always there. So what do we put in place to make sure that irrespective of the fire incidents, we are able to at least salvage some of the equipment? So most time when you use water-based suppression system or agent, you are likely to damage a lot of equipment, right? So, but they are very effective. So what has been done is to use a water mist. So it's not fully water, it's just something like gaseous, in gaseous form. So you will need a lot of it to be able to trap a lot of it to form heavy water. So this reduces the amount of water that is used during the firefighting exercise. That way, you don't lose or damage too many of your equipment. You're able to salvage some of your equipment, and they are very, very effective as well. Okay. Clean agent fire extinguishers. Okay, I mentioned this earlier on while I was talking about the fire extinguisher. So clean agent fire extinguishers use inert gases or chemicals to extinguish fires while also being safe for people and electronic equipment. Okay, all right. So yeah. So thanks. Shemo actually send a sprinkler that is in active. So you see the way it is, the water mist. You will need a lot of it to be able to get water like that. So they are like mist. So it's not fully full water. So the essence is to reduce them. It's still water, but it doesn't come in full form. So it reduces the amount of water that you use on your devices, and they are very, very effective. So if you look to this clean agent here, you see the different labels that we have to the left here. So you have safe, this one is the rating here shows, and it's green, B, which means it is safe for flammable liquids. Flammable liquids. So you need to know which one to use and when to use them. So this one is what safe for live electrical equipment. Okay, then this one, the third one here says what? Not for wood, paper, and textiles. So if the fire source has any of these, then don't use a suppression that has this label. Then the final one here says not for flammable metal fires. Okay, so anytime there's fire, you need to understand the source and you need to know which of these suppression to use. Okay, so that's the reason for you to know the labels, what they stands for. So you see, I was talking about the duct pipe earlier on, that they have a source that they are connected to for supply. So this is this is where the duct pipe get connected to get their own gas supply. Okay, so clean agent fire suppression systems fully flood a room with clean agent gas to provide the highest level of protection against fire. Okay, so when you see all of those pipes running through different locations, they have a source they are connected to for supply. So in some cases, even as a DCT technician, part of your job might just be to always make sure that these are always, you have supply for this, okay? That's all you need to do. How they get connected, disconnected, or used might not really be what you are, but to make sure that they are used, they are well serviced because they have their maintenance period as well. So that all of those are part of your job as a DCT technician to make sure that they are properly reported. You have they are serviceable, they are still in serviceable state, and then you have supplies. Okay, so if there needs to be changed, you need to report that. If you have new supplies, you need to record that, and you need to make sure that they are regularly tested before there is a fire outbreak. Effective room sealing. Okay, so rooms are built to be fully sealed in the event of an emergency. Electronics and HVAC systems are shut down automatically when the automatic suppression system activates. Okay, so like I mentioned earlier, most data centers are built with what? Fire resistant equipment. So you would hardly see any form of openings around. Okay, the whole idea is to curtail the spread of fire in the event of an outbreak. So that's why you see everywhere properly sealed. And you see the type of doors that are used, data centers, they are not the regular ones. They are fire resistant. They make sure that they are shut, they always get shut automatically. So even when you go into a data center, the door must be closed behind you, even if it is not automatic. The rule is that you don't leave a data center door open. You must close it behind you. So anytime you go into your rack center, always make sure that the door is properly shut. The whole idea is to curtail fire in the in the event of outbreak. I'm not sure I understand the question. If any of the TA understands, please, you can respond to the question there. I'm trying to read it, but I'm not able to. As fire departments low in any, okay, have they been low in any mechanical room or electrical room in data center room or access room, dry powder extinguisher or automatic? Sorry, I'm not able to, so let me not spend too much. But if you're able to rephrase the question so that I'm able to understand, or if any of the TAs can help if they understand, thanks. All right, so two things here. The essence of this effective room sealing is to curtail fire spreading fast. Okay, so you want to make sure that the fire is curtailed. It's only within the space that it is happening. Okay, that's one of the reasons why you have the rooms properly sealed and the equipment used fire resistance. Okay. Then we have the fire pass oxygen reduction. So we've talked about this, or why we might need some of this type of equipment. So oxygen reduction system remove high oxygen air from a room and ventilate the room with low oxygen air to inhibit fire. Remember, we talked about it, that one of the easiest way to fight fire is to remove at least one of the elements that are required to cause fire disaster. Okay. So in this case now, we have what is called what? Fire pass oxygen reduction. The whole idea is to try as much as possible to eliminate the oxygen within that space where there's fire to a level that it will not, it will suppress the fire. Okay. So that's the purpose of this fire pass oxygen reduction. Green energy. So this is something that you just must always think about anytime you think of fire safety, fire suppression, firefighting equipment, and all of those. Yes, Derek says, is Firepass a brand? Is Firepass a brand or a piece of equipment? It's actually a brand. So if you see here, if you see the name is actually written on the equipment. So it's Firepass. And if you look at this next slide as well, This one too is FirePass, so it's actually a brand. So you can have other types of other type of this device, oxygen reduction devices or equipment as well. So green energy. So many modern fire suppression systems use green energy for further cost saving and environmental protection. Okay, so a lot of this equipment, even though they will save you cost, but it's not really in the short term. Most time it's usually in the long term because you would have to invest initially. And then as time goes on, they help in cost reduction. But most importantly is the environmental protection that they give to you. So when you use most of these, you protect the environment against those two elements that I mentioned earlier, ozone depletion and the other one, okay? So that's why green energy is it's a major consideration when you are thinking of firefighting or fire suppression devices that you want to use in your environment, okay? So here we have a network grid or generator for off-grid. You have Grid Connect inverter from this new self-contained unit FirePass generator. Then connecting to this battery pack and then to this control system. And then you have this solar power. I don't know how many of solar power you would need, any panels you would need to power a data center, because except also maybe you are getting your power from maybe an independent power provider, those that are using panels. But for you to set up your own solar panel for energy, that might be a very huge cost on the organization, especially if your primary purpose is to provide data center service and not to provide power. So it's a lot easier for you to partner with someone in the industry to provide you with green energy than investing in that. So, but most new data centers are actually investing in green energies, looking for clean energies, because one, they reduce the risk exposure for your data center. Remember that if you decide to use green energy, so it's possible that you would have to eliminate generators, diesel, which means fuel will be reduced or not even in use at all within your environment, which is one of the elements that are required for fire. It's not the only source, but you would have also eliminated one of the sources of fuel within your environment. Okay, so that's why going for green energy will be a better idea. Okay, so you reduce the risk exposure, risk to your equipment, risk to the people, and to the environment generally. Okay, so we have more on fire suppression and the study guide, so that will also be shared with you. So let's look at the last topic for today: fire codes and compliance. Fire code and compliance. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the class, that compliance, regulation and compliance are a really big topic, okay? They are a specialty area for a lot of people. Some people just focus on regulations and compliance because they are really, really huge, especially for governments, independent regulatory bodies, and things like that. So they especially all this ISO, whatever, and other types of standards as well. So let's talk about some of them and how they affect data center operations, okay? So one of the regulations is talking about is NFPA, that's National Fire Protection Association, okay? NFPA is a US non-profit dedicated to reducing damage from fire and electrical hazards. They publish codes and standards that are meant to minimize the impact of fire and other risks. Now, most of this type of regulatory organization, what they do is they specialize in fire safety, general safety. So they have specialists within their own organization who have years of experience in terms of how to reduce the fire risk within an environment. So they've come up with different policies, standards, frameworks that based on their own experience and what they've seen work in different environments. So the whole idea is to reduce the amount of risk factors in most data center environments or most enterprise organizations. So what they do is they have their own standards, they have their code of conduct, they have their operational guidelines, what organization needs to do to prevent fire hazard, and what are the things that they need to know. So that's the essence of some of these regulatory bodies, okay? So also, some of them are also meant to certify organizations. So what they do is to come to audit different organizations. So they look at some of the equipment that they have in place. They audit those equipment, how often they are being serviced, how usable they are in their current state, and how effective they are. So they audit all of those and they certify organizations based on the output of their own audit. Now, you have different organizations that conduct this type of audit, but this is just mentioned as one of them, okay? Yep, absolutely. So you have another one, NFC 2020. So you have different ones. There are a lot of them, okay, in different countries, in different regions. So some of them are government organizations, some of them are independent organizations, some of them are for-profit, some of them are non-profit, okay? But their specialty is around safety, general safety, including fire and other hazards generally. So for NFC, it's based in Canada. That's the National Fire Code 2020, created by government-run organization, the NRC, is responsible for building fire codes and the regulations. So most time for the government-run organization like this, what they do is, so you need to meet certain standard when you are setting up your organization or when you are erecting your building. Depending on the type of building, the classification, so they will give you certain regulations that you must follow in terms of the type of firefighting equipment you must have, the different support systems that you must also have with different independent contractors in case there is fire that they can also help out. So they give you certain regulations and guidelines that you must follow. For the building itself, the type of structure you must have in place, the partitioning, the type of equipment you must use, their standard and all of those. So they give you all of those and you must meet all of those standards before they certify you and your organization to be able to operate. All right, so the next one here is fire evacuation plan. Now, if you don't know anything at all, when you work in an organization, make sure that you have this evacuation plan. It is very, very important, okay? It is very, very important that you know at least the fire evacuation plan. Your safety is very important, and you must know all of the exit plan that is available for you in case of any disaster. So the NFPA establishes a multi-step process for an evacuation plan in case of a fire. Roles must be properly outlined, communicated. Okay, remember I said something about fire marshals, having fire marshals in different floors. So you must identify the fire marshal in your own floor. So if you have questions related to any form of anything related to fire incident, is your go-to person, he or she is your go-to person. When there is fire incident, look out for the fire marshal, look out for the instructions. So because their roles are very important, they must be well defined They must be well trained to be able to carry out their roles as well, okay? So communication is very important. So you need to have a communication plan in place. When there's fire, how do you communicate fire incidents to the people? How do you make sure that they are aware? How do you make sure that they know what to do? Okay, so this might be, you might do this in form of training, in form of onboarding, in form of printed guide, or maybe even email. So it's something that needs to be done at regular interval. It's not a one-off thing. You need to communicate this regularly, okay? Then the next one is you must have a plan in place. You must have a plan in place. So when there is fire, what happens? How do we trigger our evacuation plan? Who should be responsible? Who should be accountable? Who should be involved, and who should be communicated to? Okay, that's RACI, R-A-C-I, RACI. So RACI is a standard that is used when it comes to things around change management or problem management. Okay, so it's like a framework that helps you to manage your problem management or change management. So you have RACI, R-A-C-I, R-A-C-I for RACI. R is who is going to be responsible. So responsible meaning who are those responsible for fighting the fire? Who are those responsible for evacuation plan? Who are those responsible for contacting the firefighters? So all of the roles that you have identified, who are those responsible? Then the A in RACI is who is accountable? Who should be accountable? So if anything goes wrong, or every plan that you have in place, who should be accountable? Okay, so there's difference between being responsible. You can be responsible for something and not being accountable for that thing. Okay, so there are two different things. So being responsible might just be being a single player. But being accountable makes you a major player, okay? Sorry, if you are not saying anything, can you please mute your mic? Okay, so talking again about the RACI, the R is what? Who should be responsible? So that's usually most time who is responsible. In most cases, is just a single player, right? But who is accountable most time will be what? An active player, okay, because he's going to be accountable for either the success or the failure of all the plan. Okay, usually that role is for someone within the management. For us, who is responsible, it doesn't have to be a management person. It can be a fire marshal, it can be an evacuator or whatever. But for who is accountable, accountability to might not really be someone in management too, but somebody that is an active player in the whole evacuation plan, okay? Then you have the C in RACI. We've talked about the R, the A, now the C. The C is about who should be communicated to, who should be talked to, who should we communicate with. We've talked about communication, why communication is very, very important, okay? So you must know all of the active players in your evacuation plan. Who are your fire marshals? Who are your firefighters? Who are your fire brigades? Who are the external whatever that you need to communicate with during and after. So it doesn't end during the disaster alone, during and after. So that's why it's an evacuation plan. So especially if you have to do head count, how do you know that everybody in the building is out and nobody is left behind? Derek is asking, how do you become a POC like a fire marshal? Is that a volunteer role? In most cases, it is a volunteer role, okay? So usually organizations will ask for volunteers that will then be trained Okay, so they become the fire marshals for the organization. So they get certified in some different fire fighting training. So even some are not just for fire, some evacuation, some recovery, some different roles that they will play, but they are referred to as fire marshal. Some just communication. They are the one that bring all of the active players together to make sure that whatever that needs to be done gets done, okay? So I've talked about the R, the A, the C, and then the last one is the I in the RACI. Who should be informed? Who should be informed? So in your evacuation plan, you must identify who needs to be informed, okay? The information is not for everybody. So there are some information that needs to get to some certain people while the evacuation plan is in place or ongoing. So you need to identify who needs to be informed. Who needs to be informed might be the owner of the organization that some things have gone bad or whatever. So, but you need to identify based on whatever incident that is happening, you need to identify who needs to be informed. So that's RACI itself. It's used in different cases. I've just explained how to use it when it comes to problem management. So it can be used in other scenarios as well, like change management, service management, and other type of management. Or it can also be used for problem management, okay? So that's where your plan comes. You must have a plan in place, and you must have people that are what? Responsible, accountable, informed, and informed on this plan. Okay, so that's where that will help you. The RACI, that's how the RACI will help you for all of this plan. Remember that this evacuation plan is cumulative of everything that is here. Okay. Then inspect. That's the next phase. Inspection to make sure that everyone in the building is out, no one is left behind. Every action that is in the plan has been taken into consideration and has been activated and everything. So inspect is the next one. And the last one here is practice and review. Practice your evacuation plan and review your evacuation plan. Your evacuation plan cannot be like a cast and stone. So it needs to be reviewed based on new updates, based on new technologies. If there's a change, if there's a change in the physical structure of the organization, that most likely would affect your evacuation plan. So maybe they've added new doors, new exit, and all of those, or you've moved your what's it called? The fire safety location where everybody needs to go. So if it has changed and all of this, so you need to review your entire plan to update it and then use the RACI to decide what needs to happen. Who is going to be responsible for all of the new changes? Who do we need to communicate it to? This communication needs to go to everybody. So communication in this regard is not going to be for selective people. So it might not be all types of information that you are going to give out to everybody. So you might decide and classify the type of information that goes out to everyone and other classified ones, different people that are, should be informed, or that are those that are responsible and those that are accountable. They need to get almost every information. Okay, so this is how your evacuation plan should always be. Now, for you as a data center technician, you should also have an idea of this evacuation plan. Everybody within an organization should do that. You should have an idea of what your evacuation plan looks like. Who is your fire marshal? What are the steps that needs to be taken in the case of fire incidents? Where is the closest exit door to you? So you must always know your closest exit door anywhere you are at every point in time. It's a very, very important thing to know. Monique is asking, will the plan delay escaping? That's a very good one. So your question should also, that's why we talked about practice and review, because that's what that is meant to take care of. Okay, the idea of practice is to know how long it takes. So I've been part of a simulation. Okay, so they told everybody that there was going to be a simulation. So during that simulation, the alarm came on, and everybody used their own evacuation path to come to the ground floor. Now there is a fire marshal waiting for everybody from different floors. They took the note of how long it took everybody from the different floor to get to that point of call. The whole idea is for them to work on to see if there's a better way to fasten all of those. So that's part of the practice and review that we are talking about. Okay, so that's part of the drill. So drill is not just for them to know whether their alarm system is working. It's also for them to be able to take note how long it takes for everyone from different floors to be able to get to the fire assembly. Okay, so they take note of that, then they review their plan, they look at the possible exit routes that they can use to fasten that. Okay, so the whole idea of the plan is not to delay escaping, rather is to make sure that it's effective. It's not about it also being fast, it's just making sure that it's a safe passage. That's what is very important. Safety is what is important. What matters is that you get out of the place. So if you are talking in terms of fast, the fastest route might not be a safe route, okay? So in your plan, you have to consider which route is safe. And and if you are thinking of fast as well, they would have considered all of those in the structural plan, while that is the building is still being planned, so that they make sure that there's exit point close to every floor, and that is fast enough for everybody to get out of the environment. Okay, so that's it on fire safety. We've considered a lot today. We've looked at the triangle of fire elements. We've looked at all of the 3 elements that must be present for fire hazard to happen. Looked at oxygen, we've looked at fuel, and we've looked at heat, and we've looked at the different examples of the components that falls under each one of them. We've looked at the different fire detection mechanisms or devices that you can have, their range, their sensor level, when to use them, in what scenarios. We've looked at some of the infrastructure considerations, and then we've also looked at fire suppressions and the different types that you can have in your environment. So that's just a summary of everything that we've done today. So we have a few minutes. If there are questions, I'll be glad to take them now.
Thank you so much, Tosin. That was so interesting and insightful. Yeah, it's time for questions.
Guys, remember that also, like I mentioned, so for everywhere you decide you get a job, if it's a data center eventually, so it's one of the first training that you would get. Safety is a big topic in every organization, especially that of the data center. So if you get a job in the data center, one of the first set of onboarding training that you'll be given is on safety. So I didn't use fire safety intentionally because safety is bigger than just fire. There are other types of safety concerns that they will talk about as well. So, and it's going to be, apart from the onboarding scenario, so it's also a regular topic that you will definitely see coming up, maybe quarterly. There was a time I was working in one of the data center, one of the government's data center in East Africa. So every Tuesday that we come to work, so we discuss safety first for an hour. So you talk about your experience over the last 1 week. What are the things you have done to make sure that your safety and the office safety is always considered? So you have to say something. if you don't say something, it means you have not been safety conscious. So that means the way they've structured their own environment is that you must have something to say every week, something new that you have learned about safety, what to do, what not to do, and things like that. And it's made everyone to be safety conscious. So, and I said that intentionally because safety is everybody's responsibility at work or wherever you find yourself. So it's something you must always consider. Anytime you have a task to do, safety must be part of your considerations. Derek, please go ahead and ask your questions.
Yeah, so for a plan, so I'd kind of assume that the fire marshals would have radios or walkie-talkies all the time. And that's how they would communicate, and then we'd possibly meet in a, you know, depending on the severity of it, and then exit the building type situation. Is that how it would maybe go? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. A very good question. So if you look at this evacuation plan, so one of the highlights here is communication. So communication itself is not just, so there are a lot of things that you consider here: the message, the medium, and device to use. Okay, so communication here is not just about sending email or whatever. So during disaster, email is the last thing you want to send to people, right? Because you want them out of their space as fast as possible. So that means email is not a good way to communicate during
radios.
Yeah, so absolutely. You want something that is mobile and something that doesn't require their own presence, that just attend to their ears alone at that point. So definitely radio would be a very good medium in that scenario. And that's why you also have the fire alarm strategically located in different locations. See, the communication here is going to be both verbal and non-verbal. That's why you will see a lot of signals, evacuation signals, where to go, where's the exit point. In some cases, that's why even in a plane, you see lightning lights coming on the floor to indicate where the exit route is, and a lot of that. So all of those are part of your communication plan. So those are some of the things that you must have factored in during practice and review and planning, initial stage of your planning. So in the case of fire, how do we communicate to people? Okay, so in the case the one I've experienced, apart from the radio, they also have a public address system as well. So all of those will be activated immediately. So that's the job of most of the firefighters and the marshals. So the one that is responsible for the public address system, the moment there is an action to be taken, that's where it moves to immediately. So everybody goes to, they have roles, which is one of the things we've identified here. So roles have been clearly identified and also assigned to people, so that at the point of evacuation, everyone goes to their own point, what they need to do. And everybody that you've identified on that role also have their own communication strategy and plan. Okay, so everybody work according to the plan during that. Okay, I hope that answers your question. Great. Any other question? No question?
There's one in the chat.
Okay. Is it common for data center to be in high-rise building or multi-floors? That's a very good question, right? So remember we talked about different types of data center, right? We talked about on-premise data center, usually mostly used by organizations to service their own internal needs, right? Then we talked about cloud data center, which is usually for service providers. And then we talk about hybrid, which is a combination of on-prem and cloud, right? Now, in most on-premise environments, it can be in a multi-floor, right? There's no restriction really in terms of where a data center can be, whether it should only be in a ground floor. No, in fact, a lot of data centers, it will interest you to know that they are not in a multi-floor environment. They are usually not located on the ground floor because there are a lot of security considerations for that, okay? So also in case there's a flood So you don't want to have your data center on the ground floor where flood can get in there easily. So don't think that because of the data center nature, it should always be on the ground floor. Most data center, even if they are on the ground floor, they are usually in elevated floors. Okay, so because there are a lot of things that comes in play when you are planning a data center. So, but definitely it can be in a high-rise building, but not too high. And definitely mostly not on the ground floor. And if it's on the ground floor, it will have to be an elevated floor. I hope that answers it. Yeah, great. But you see that a lot of the ones, the 3D Femi showed us looks like it's on the ground floor, right? So a lot of those ones that are just dedicated data centers mostly are something like that, but the floors are usually elevated. Okay, so they are elevated floors. So because of flood or any other natural disaster, so that has to be taken care of. Also, you don't want to place it somewhere too high because there are a lot of equipment that needs to get into the data center. So you don't want to be struggling to get your racks, servers, and everything to your data center as well. So most time, from what I've seen, data centers, and I'm not saying this authoritatively, but based on experience, it's either first, second, and third floor, depending on the height of the building itself. Most ones I've seen don't go beyond that. Mostly first, second, and third floor. Except, of course, if you have a highly secure data center, maybe government, or even some for military or whatever, it might be somewhere very high where people hardly have access to control access and a lot of that. So it depends on what the data center is, the service it is providing, and how secure it should be, and other factors together. Okay, any other question? So like I said, some of you might decide to pick interest in compliance and regulation. It's also worth it. It's something a lot of people do as well. So maybe when you get there, it might interest you, maybe not as well, but it's just another area of data center as well, definitely. You have a dedicated unit for compliance and regulation.
Hello. Would you also recommend like hazmat recommendation?
Sorry, I didn't get that. Do you want to take it again?
Oh yeah, I was asking if like, should you get hazmat certified? Is that something else?
Well, so if you can, it's good. If not, then the organization should get you trained on that as well. So, but some people do it personally for themselves. So what it only means is that when you get to an organization, it's part of the checks that you already have that you probably, if it is required in your job, then you don't have to do that again. But if you haven't, then you might have to go through that training. In some organization, it might be part of the requirements if you're applying for a job that is really about safety. So they might be looking for someone who's already certified already, or at least have gone through the training. But if you are going to be, if your job nature is a data center technician, I don't think it's required. And if it is required, you'll be trained on that.
Copy that. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. So today we draw the curtain at this point. Thank you so very much, Tosin. I read somewhere that firefighters need about 100 hours of training. I think we try to do ours in less than 3 hours. But we don't have a certificate for you as a firefighter. We will continue next week with other topics as we dive into the world of data centers. Have a fantastic rest of the day, guys. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.